Hello all, myself Sudha Rani, working as assistant professor in Mlritm, Hyderabad. Here, my topic today will be on ecosystem. So, main points included in my topic will be what is an ecosystem, types of ecosystem, and classification of an ecosystem, functions of ecosystem, and the structure of an ecosystem. So, what exactly is an ecosystem and why we should know more about this? So, that is what I'm dealing today. So, my first slide is on ecosystem. Ecosystem and structural and functional unit of biosphere. So, in an ecosystem, it is all interaction between living things and non-living things, or we call it as biotic components and abiotic components. An interaction between biotic components and abiotic components, or we call it as an interaction between biotic components and the physical components. So, life is possible because there is some kind of interaction with the environment. So, what is an ecosystem? How do we define it? So, it is an structural and functional unit of biosphere. So you can see here some of the slides where beautiful ecosystems, the world, natural life. You can see the greenery over this world. Okay, next, types of an ecosystem. There are two types of ecosystem, micro ecosystem and macro ecosystems. So as I told you, the life is dependent on the environmental factors or abiotic factors. So micro ecosystem is a small, as the name implies, it's a small ecosystem. Micro can be as small as a drop of water. So even a drop of water is an ecosystem because in that drop of water, you have living creatures, you have life, and we also have the water, the physical component and the atmosphere around it. So a drop of water is also said to be a micro ecosystem. And a macro ecosystem. Of course, a macro ecosystem can be as large as an ocean, as large as a forest. So two types of ecosystems, micro ecosystem and the macro ecosystem. Next, what is the classification of an ecosystem? What are the main classifications in an ecosystem? First one includes its natural ecosystem and it is an artificial ecosystem or anthropogenic ecosystem. So two mainly classified into two types, natural and the artificial or anthropogenic ecosystem. Now in natural ecosystem, we have terrestrial ecosystems and aquatic ecosystems. Terrestrial ecosystems are concerned with the desert, or we are talking about a grassland, we are talking about forest areas. All this comes under terrestrial ecosystems. When we are talking about aquatic ecosystems, we are speaking about freshwater ecosystems and the marine ecosystems. In the marine ecosystems, as we all know, it is all the saline waters. So in freshwater ecosystems, it is of two types. We have two types of freshwaters. One is running waters. We call it Latic ecosystem, where the water is running, the water is flowing. It can be a river, it can be a stream, it can be a creek, or it can be a spring. The water is flowing. Then we have lentic ecosystems, where the water is standing. The stagnant water, we call it lentic, and the flowing water, we call it Latic ecosystems. So this is all concerned with the natural ecosystem. So natural ecosystem classified into two types, that is the terrestrial ecosystem and the aquatic ecosystem. In aquatic, again it is classified into two types, the fresh waters and the saline waters and the marine waters. In the fresh water, again it is classified into Latic and lentic. Okay, that is all about natural ecosystem. Then when we are talking about anthropogenic ecosystem, or we call it as an artificial ecosystem. In an artificial ecosystem where man is involved, you can see some of the examples here, the dams, or we are talking about the aquarium, we are talking about zoological parks, or we are talking about botanical gardens. All this comes under man-made ecosystems, or we call it anthropogenic ecosystems, where man is included. Especially when we talk about crop, when we are talking about fields. So all these are anthropogenic because man is involved. Naturally, in so many acres of land, same kind of plant doesn't grow. So it is only with the involvement of human beings, we have a field, huge acres of land under cultivation with the same variety of crops. So that is what I mean by man-made ecosystems, or we call it by anthropogenic ecosystems. Here you can see some of them. We are culturing, especially I'll talk about zoological parks. Zoological park is a man-made ecosystem where the main objective of setting up a zoological park in the city is to protect the animals, to conserve them. Okay, to conserve them or to give protection to them. Especially, we are protecting the endangered varieties of animals, and we are seeing that their reproduction is being increased and new forms of life are on this earth. Especially, their main objective is conservation of endangered animals, and seeing that their reproduction is being, they are giving life to new life forms. Okay, that is about zoological park. Then we have a botanical garden. Botanical garden also the same. I mean, these botanical gardens are concerned with the plant varieties. So growing them, preserving them, protecting them, conserving them for different, objectives. Some may be commercially useful, some are medicinally useful, some we are growing them because on the name of research. You must have heard about ICRISAT in our own city, International Crop Research Institute for Semi-Arid Tropics, ICRISAT in Hyderabad itself. So ICRISAT, where huge areas of land is under cultivation for research purposes. So all these we come under, or we call it man-made ecosystems or anthropogenic ecosystem. For every man-made ecosystem or an anthropogenic ecosystem, there is a purpose. So as I told you, it may be commercial, it may be industrial, or it may be research oriented, or it may be botanical gardens conservation oriented. So that is the main classification of an ecosystem. So natural and anthropogenic ecosystem. Next, what is the structure of an ecosystem? What actually it contains? So many a times you hear or you read in the papers, you hear in the news that yes, environment is important. We have to protect it. We have to protect it, conserve it, save it. So why we have to save it? What is the connection between us and the environment? Why this protection is required? So that is what you are going to learn in this particular session. So structure of an ecosystem, two components, biotic components and abiotic components. As the name implies, biotic components are with life, living components. Abiotic components are the physical components which support life. So here I mean to say, in an ecosystem there is a close relation. Some materials are being exchanged between the living components and the physical components. There is an exchange of materials. So that is why life is possible. So what exactly it is, that is what we are going to see in this particular session. So biotic components, what are these biotic components of an ecosystem? So these are the different life forms. It may be insects, it may be algae, it may be amphibians, or you're talking about small microscopic life forms. All these are included in biotic components of an ecosystem. It can be fungi, the algae, the living components, or the biotic components. Okay, you can see different forms of life. All these components are included in biotic components. Next one, abiotic components. Abiotic components are also called as physical components which support life. So an abiotic component or a factor is a non-living condition or thing such as climate. It can be heat, it can be water, soil pH, it can be soil moisture, it can be the fertility of the soil. All these conditions are said to be abiotic factors, or we call them physical factors, which makes life possible or which supports life. So these abiotic components are also very important. So you can see the climate regulations, or we are talking about the soil structure, sometimes or acidity in the soil or acidity in water, pH levels in the water. All these we call them as abiotic components of an ecosystem. So structure is of two types, biotic and abiotic components. Next, in biotic, the first component are the producers. As we all know, producers are the plants, the autotrophs, which can only organisms which can make their own food. During the process of photosynthesis, by using sunlight and carbon dioxide and forming the food in those plants. So we call them autotrophs. Autos means self, trophs means nourishment. So they are producers which produce food, and all other consumers are dependent on this producers. Okay, next, the consumers. Consumers are the next variety of biotic components where we call them heterotrophs. Heteros means another or different, and trophs means the nourishment. Heterotrophs means they are dependent on other organisms for their food. So in heterotrophs, we can see the herbivores, the carnivores, and the omnivores. Herbivores are said to be the key industry animals because they are intermediate between the producers and the consumers. So they are responsible for converting plant material into animal material. So that is the reason we call them key industry animals. So herbivores are said to be key industry animals. Then we have carnivores, of course, the flesh eating animals. Then we have omnivores, which eat both. And of course, the detrivores. Detritivores or decomposers, we cannot forget them because they are responsible. They are also called as reducers, and they are responsible in making our earth clean. Next, that is what I'm talking about. Detrivores, they feed on dead material and plant and animal material it can be. They perform an additional function, which is to return essential nutrients back to the soil. So the main function is returning of essential nutrients by decomposing the living organisms, and the essential nutrients are back to the soil because of decomposers, or we call them detritivores, or they are also called as reducers. Okay, you can see some examples here, millipedes, or we are talking about some worms, crabs, dung flies and all. So all these, yes, they are examples of this detrivores, and which are responsible, or they perform an additional duty to return the essential nutrients back to the earth. Next, what are the functions of an ecosystem? So the functions of ecosystem broadly classified into 4 functions. So what actually this ecosystem is doing so that the life is possible here. So we have 4 main functions: productivity, decomposition, energy flow, and nutrient cycling. These 4 are the major functions of an ecosystem. What is this productivity? That we'll see now. So productivity in an ecosystem refers to the rate of production, that is the amount of organic matter accumulated in any unit time. So productivity means the key living forms responsible for energy production or the food productivity are the plants, or we are calling them as producers. So it represents the total amount of energy fixed or stored by the autotrophs per unit time in an ecosystem. That is what we call by productivity, production of food. So this is mainly the responsibility of the autotrophs or the producers. So it is of 2 types here, primary productivity and the secondary productivity. So 2 types of production is going on, the primary and the secondary. What is this productivity? Production of food in the plant. Okay, because they are the only organisms which can make their own food. Next, primary productivity. So it is the rate at which the solar energy is stored or trapped by the autotrophs, and these plants make their food because they are photosynthetic due to a presence of a green pigment called chlorophyll. So the amount of food which is prepared by the plant during the process of photosynthesis, we call it productivity. That is primary productivity. Then in the primary productivity, we have 2 types, gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. So let us come to that afterwards. Then let us talk about secondary productivity. Secondary productivity is the actual, much of the actual amount of food which is consumed by the herbivores and later eaten by the carnivores or by the omnivores. Actual amount of food which is stored in the higher order organisms, we call it secondary productivity. I'll show you one example here. Suppose a caterpillar is eating the plant, and the energy it is gaining is 200 joules. Okay, out of 200 joules, 100 joules of the energy is not assimilated by it, or it is not ingested by it. It is being excreted out of the body. It is not absorbed by the body. So 100 joules of energy it is consuming to excrete. So that energy is being used to excrete the food from its body. Then 67 joules is used in cellular respiration. Okay, so out of 200 joules, 100 joules is used for excretion because all the food we are taking is not absorbed into the body. Most of it, it's been wasted. It's going out of the body. It is excreted out of the body. Then 67 joules is used for cellular respiration. Then what is left? 33 joules of energy is left in that particular organism. Okay, so that is what we mean by secondary productivity. The amount of energy or the food production actually stored in the higher level organisms, we call it secondary productivity. So that is one example shown here. Next, as I told you, in primary productivity, there are of two types, gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. So gross primary productivity means in the total process of photosynthesis, how much of organic matter is synthesized by the producers at that particular time. We call it as a gross primary productivity. It means the total food production in the plant during the process of photosynthesis, we call it gross primary productivity. Then when we come to net primary productivity, it is nothing but, I have a formula here. Net primary productivity is equivalent to gross primary productivity minus respiration. Okay, so this is the energy which is left in the organism. The net primary productivity is the energy left in the organism after it loses energy because of respiration or because of excretion. That amount of energy we call it NPP. So you can see in the picture, from the solar energy, using the solar radiation, the food is being prepared by the plant during the process of photosynthesis. But after the food is produced, most of the energy is used for cellular work, is used in the form of respiration, or it is used to excrete. It is used for excretion. The leftover energy is the net primary productivity which is there in the plant. So according to an ecosystem rules and regulations, only 10% of the energy is transferred from one trophic level to the next trophic level. Okay, that is, so productivity is of gross primary productivity, net primary productivity in primary productivity. Then we have secondary productivity. Next, the next function of an ecosystem, and the main function of an ecosystem is one of the main functions is the decomposition. So decomposition is nothing but which is breaking down the remains of dead organisms into smaller pieces and digest them with the chemicals. So this process is going on. So in the forest, in the ecosystem, there are lots of life. Every day in a forest, thousands, lakhs of leaves fall to the ground. Hundreds of animals die. So what is happening to it? They are all being decomposed by the decomposers, or we are calling them detritivores. Okay, then their main function, as I told you before, so the lost minerals are brought back to the soil because of this decomposers. Okay. Next, how energy is flowing in an ecosystem. So the next function is, like, energy is flowing in an ecosystem in the form of cycles. There are very important cycles. Some of them I have chosen 5 cycles which are important. Many cycles going on in the atmosphere. That is why we are able to live happily, or life is possible here. So let us move to the first cycle. I have here water cycle, carbon cycle, oxygen cycle, nitrogen cycle, and some energy cycles. So out of these 5, yes, you must have already heard about this water cycle, which plays a very important role. So you can see the water cycle, 4 stages, or you can say evaporation, condensation, and the precipitation. So these stages of water cycle, the water is being evaporated, then it has been condensed, then it is precipitated, and there is rainfall. So the cycle has been, it has been conducted in this way in the ecosystem. So one of the most important cycles. So that main reason why water is available on the atmosphere is because the water cycle is going on efficiently, or it has been regulated properly by the ecosystem. Next, the carbon cycle, or we call it as the carbon dioxide cycle. One of the very important gas in the atmosphere. Now the present percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is 0.04%. So this percentage of carbon dioxide, one of the main greenhouse gas is the carbon dioxide. So you can see here the cycle, carbon dioxide cycle. Because of the process of photosynthesis, it has been absorbed by the plants or by the autotrophs. Then you can see the autotrophs, they require carbon dioxide when they are preparing their own food in the process of photosynthesis. Now, we are all the higher level organisms, we are dependent on the autotrophs for our food. So definitely carbon dioxide plays an important role. So in the preparation of food in the in the plants, and those plants are only eaten by us. The main food for us are the plants. So you can see the cycle is going on, and the carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere by animal respiration, and you can see the plant respiration, the carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere. This is one natural cycle which is going on in the atmosphere or in the ecosystem. But what is the other component added to this is the automobile sector or from the industrial sector. Extra amount of carbon dioxide is added into the atmosphere because of human interference. This is the main problem with the interference of human beings. The cycle is going on properly. It has been taken by the plants and it has been consumed by the animals. Again, when the plant and animal dies, those remains liberate carbon dioxide, which is reaching back to the atmosphere. But the additional amount of carbon dioxide which we are releasing because of the interference of human beings, because of industrial sector or transport sector, that is the main problem we are facing in the rise of temperatures around the world. This is one of the main problems. Why? Because the human beings interference and lots of carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere, and the only organisms which can trap them are the plants. So the plantation is always, many a times it is always the plantation all over the world. It's the common phenomenon because they are the only organisms which can take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We are releasing extra amount of carbon dioxide, so extra plants are required to take out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So this is one cycle where we have seen it is by the naturally it is going, yes, nature is for man's need, not for his greed, as we heard it many times. Yes, it is for man's need only. So, but when we give extra amount of carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere, that is why we are facing all these problems. So, when we stop this, definitely the cycle will go on in the nature. It has, as I told you, one of the functions of an ecosystem is cycles. All the cycles are going on. It is regulating those cycles so that it is, life sustains on this particular planet. Okay, that is all about carbon cycle. Next, oxygen cycle. Of course, most important gas for us, for the living organisms. Definitely the plants are liberating during the process of photosynthesis. They're giving out oxygen. They're taking in carbon dioxide and giving out oxygen. So we all require oxygen for breathing. So one of the most important gases, in the atmosphere, 20% of the atmosphere gases is of oxygen. So this is the cycle which is going on, a simple cycle. Yes, that is why it is important to us. Next, nitrogen. Nitrogen is one of the important cycles in the ecosystem. Why it is important? Because nitrogen is the gas which cannot be absorbed directly by the plant. But in the plant, the production of amino acids or proteins take place because of the nitrogen gas, because nitrogen gas is responsible for the production of amino acids and proteins in the plant. So you can see the cycle here. A plant cannot take in nitrogen directly. It cannot absorb nitrogen directly from the atmosphere. So how does it absorb? The plant has nodules in its roots. You can see the nodules. Okay, the bulb-like structures. In the nodules, there are microscopic bacteria. So these bacteria, they fix the nitrogen. So they are called as nitrogen fixing bacteria, and living in the legume of the root nodules. We call them root nodules, bulb-like structures which are present in the roots. So in the nodules, we have that microscopic bacteria. And because of the process of ammonification, this nodules, the bacteria in the nodules, they convert nitrogen into ammonium. And you can see here another process of nitrification where ammonium is converted into nitrites. Okay, this is done by nitrogen fixing bacteria here. This is done by nitrifying bacteria here. So ammonium is converted into nitrites by a bacteria called as nitrifying bacteria, and the process is called as nitrification. And nitrates are converted into nitrates, okay, due to nitrifying bacteria again. And this conversion, after the nitrates are converted into nitrates, these nitrates are then assimilated by the plant. So plant cannot take nitrogen directly, so this is the process which is going on in the plant. How it is being absorbed? It is being absorbed by the bacteria which are present in the nodules, root nodules of the leguminous plants especially. And nitrogen is important for production of amino acids and proteins which build up our body mass. So definitely these are the three steps in this nitrogen cycle: ammonification, nitrification, and assimilation. So due to these three steps, what happens is nitrogen is absorbed by the root nodules. In the root nodules, the microscopic organisms are there, the bacteria is there. It converts all this process and make easy for the plant to absorb nitrogen in the form of nitrates. So that nitrates is being absorbed by the plant, and it helps in the production of proteins. And when the plant dies or the animal dies, which when we feed upon these plant products, and when we die or the plant dies, so the nutrients are back to the soil, and as well as the nitrogen is back to the atmosphere. And here sometimes these nitrates, because of a bacteria called denitrifying bacteria, is from the lightning, when there is lots of lightning in the sky, when nitrogen gas is released abundantly, that gas is converted into nitrates by bacteria called as denitrifying bacteria, and the nitrates are again back to the atmosphere. So this is about the nitrogen cycle. So we all understand we supply fertilizers to the plant in the form of NPK, nitrates, phosphates, and potassium. So nitrates is something which we give to the plant additionally, but normally in the ecosystem also there is a nitrogen cycle going on, which naturally the ecosystem supplies nitrates to the plants. Okay, this is one nitrogen cycle. Next, so those are the cycles which definitely play a vital role in making life indispensable on this earth. Okay, next we come to the next concepts of energy cycles. We call it as food chain. So what exactly I am talking about interdependence or interaction. So why are we dependent on other things, other animals? As I told you, producers are the only organisms which can prepare their own food. So there is first concept here is the food chain. What is a food chain? The transfer of energy from one tropic level to the next tropic level, we call it as a food chain. You can see the energy is transferred from one tropic level to the next tropic level and to the next tropic level. So this transfer, the process of transfer of energy, we call it as a food chain. You can see here from the sun, the grass, the grasshopper, and then the shrew or a mouse, and then it is the owl. So it is a food chain. The food is passing from one tropic level to the next, and one organism is dependent on the other organism. Of course, the plant is dependent upon the sunlight, and of course the carbon dioxide present in the atmosphere. So that is the food chain. Now next, what are the types of food chains? In the food chains, we have two types: grazing food chain and detritus food chain. Okay, so grazing and detritus. Now let me talk about the grazing food chains. You can see here in a grazing food chain, the food chain starts from the producer. It starts from the plant and it goes on. The food chain goes to the last organism. Okay, so it starts with green plants and it culminates with the carnivores. It stops with the carnivores. That is what we call by a grazing food chain. So the food from one tropic level is passed into the next tropic level. And always remember, there is only 10% of the total energy transferred to the next level. We call it 10% law. Okay, this one. Next, detritus food chain. So I told you two varieties. One is grazing, the grazing food chain. It starts with the plant. Detritus food chain. It starts with the detritus, or we call it as dead leaves. Most of the times we can see mangrove plantations. Okay, from these plantations, the leaves fall onto the water. In the water, when the leaf falls down, then the food chain starts. The leaves starts getting decomposed. Bacteria start acting upon the leaf, and they are eaten by the next level of organisms, and these are eaten by the next level of organisms. So leaf litter in the forest, then the fungi or the bacteria acts on it, and then it is continued by the next level of organisms. So detritus food chain is the food chain which starts with dead organic matter. So food chain is of two varieties, grazing food chain and the detritus food chain. Next, what is a food web? So food web is an interconnection of food chains, or you can say interconnected matrix of food chains. We call it as a food web. Here in nature, the relationships are not very isolated. One organism can be a source of food for multiple organisms, from many kinds of organisms. So that is the reason it is so complex. Okay, it's not linear food chain always. You can see here, instead of a simple linear food chain, there is a web-like structure formed by these interlinked food chains, or we call interconnected matrix of food chains. We call it as a food web. So each organism in nature can be a source of food to multiple organisms. Okay, that is one. That is food chain, and I'll show you an example. Yes, this is one of the example. Yes, you can see your rabbit can be a source of food for the jackal as well as for the wild cat or the jackal. A goat can be eaten by the jackal or it can be eaten by the lion also. So one organism can be a source of food to multiple organisms. There is no hard and fast rule in a forest that this organism should be eaten by that organism only. There are no such rules. So this is what we call it by a food web. It is an interconnection of food chains or network of food chains. We call it as a food web. So everywhere you can see one organism can be a source of food for multiple organisms. That is what I mean by a food web. So that is the different concepts or the functions of a ecosystem. Now let us move to the next topic called ecological pyramids. So you must have heard about a famous saying, a picture is worth thousands of words. One picture, you can depict thousands of words from a single picture. So that is the reason Sir Charles Elton, he's the person, he's the scientist, he designed these pyramids. So these pyramids are also called as Eltonian pyramids or ecological pyramids. What he has done, the food chain, he has depicted in the form of a triangle, okay, in the form of a pyramid shape. So why he has done it? For a better understanding of the structure of an ecosystem. To better understand the ecosystem structure, what he has done is, he has designed a shape called a pyramid and he has placed the producers at the bottom. So ecological pyramids are nothing but graphical representations of to represent three ecological parameters. What are those three ecological parameters? First parameter is the number of individuals present. Okay, second parameter is the biomass. Third one is the energy supply in that particular ecosystem. So all this is depicted in the form of a picture. It's only for our better understanding. So you can see here the producers are placed at the bottom because the width of the base of the pyramid is wider. So the producers are at the bottom. It implies that the number of producers are more when compared to the consumers. So let us see the first one. Ecological pyramids, you can see here pyramid of biomass, pyramid of numbers, pyramid of energy. So in order to depict these three ecological parameters, he has made a graphical representation just for our clear, better understanding. Okay. So let us see what are these pyramids. Next, pyramid of numbers. So first one is the pyramid of numbers. In the form of a picture, in the form of a representation, he has shown that the number of producers are more when compared to the consumers. That is the reason he has placed the producers at the bottom and the consumers are placed at the apex. Okay, so by this diagram you can simply say that the number is more here, the number is less here. That is what he want to do. So pyramid of numbers, this one, the producers are at the bottom, the consumers are at the top. Now, pyramid of numbers, as I was talking, this is an upright pyramid where you can see the number of producers are more. That is why It is straight. The pyramids are at the bottom. The producers are at the bottom. The consumers are at the apex. Now, if you are talking same pyramid of numbers, there are some deviations. This is called as an inverted pyramid. Inverted pyramid because here the producer is only one and the consumers are many. So you can see the producer is only one tree. Next, you have herbivorous birds, which are many, and we have parasites, which are more than the birds. Then we have hyperparasites, which are still more when compared to the parasites. So this kind of ecosystem or this kind of pyramid, we call it inverted pyramid, where the producer is only one and the consumers are many. So this is one. Next one is spindle-shaped pyramid. Spindle-shaped pyramid, also the producer is only one. The herbivorous birds are many. And then when you come to carnivorous birds, again they are less. So he has given a shape like this, which is said to be spindle-shaped pyramid. So the producers are more only single and the consumers are more. So that is why a shape is given like this. Okay, in an inverted pyramid, the pyramid is only one. The producer is only one, the consumers are many. So that is an inverted pyramid. But here in a spindle shaped pyramid, you can see the producer is only one tree. The consumers have increased. Again, they have decreased. So he has given the shape of an spindle shape. He has given the spindle shape to this pyramid. So we call them spindle shaped pyramid. This pyramid also depicts number. This pyramid also depicts number. By just showing this representation, you can easily say that the number of producers are less when compared to number of consumers. Same thing, you can, by this looking at this particular picture, we can depict that the number of producers are less when compared to consumers, and the higher order consumers are still more or less. That is why this shape is being given to them. So that is all about pyramid of numbers. Now the second one is pyramid of biomass. Biomass is the living matter present in us, what energy we have gained, or the matter living component which is present in us, we call it as a biomass. In the biomass, you can see the producers are at the bottom because the number is more. Of course, the biomass is also more. Okay, herbivores, you can see as the number is decreasing, the biomass is also decreasing. So this is what we call it as an upright pyramid. Living matter present in an individual. Okay, that we call it as a biomass. So here, because the number of producers are more, the biomass is more. As we are going to the apex of the pyramid, the number of consumers are becoming less. That is why the biomass is less. So that is why we call it as an upright pyramid in the pyramid of biomass. Okay, next one. In the pyramid of biomass only, we have inverted pyramid, where you can see the producers are more in number only, but the weight is not more. Here the producers are zooplanktons. You must have heard about different larvae of fishes or different aquatic organisms. We call them zooplanktons. So zooplanktons present here are the producers here. Suppose you are taking that kind of food chain. The zooplanktons are at the bottom. Then the next level will be the herbivorous fishes. Next level will be the carnivorous fishes. At each level, you can see the biomass is increasing. So we call it as an inverted pyramid of biomass in an aquatic ecosystem. So this happens in an aquatic ecosystem only. So the producers here are the zooplanktons. Zooplanktons are nothing but the larvae of different aquatic life. So when these are being fed up by the next level of organisms, their biomass is increasing. Then these are being fed by the next level of organisms, their biomass is also increasing. And as you can see, the biomass present in the producers is far, far less when compared to the consumers. So that is why we are calling this as an inverted pyramid of biomass. Okay, fine. Next, pyramid of energy. So pyramid of energy is always said to be upright. There are no deviations in this particular pyramid. You can see the primary producers are at the bottom and the energy is larger. And when you are going towards the apex, you can see the energy is decreasing. As I told you, only 10% of the energy passes from one tropic level to the next tropic level. Of course, it depends upon the number also. The number is more, so the energy content in that producers are more. So as you're going towards the apex, the energy is decreasing. So in the pyramid of energy, there are no deviations. We call it an upright pyramid always. pyramid of energy is always upright. Okay. What are the functions of an ecosystem? As I was talking about so many times, ecosystem, it's important. Why it is important? What actually it is doing? So as I was talking in this particular session, the cycles, it is regulating the cycles, and it is maintaining indirectly or direct benefits on human beings, like clean air or the water present, soil, or we are talking about soil formation, climate regulation. All these are the different services it is providing to us. So that is why the nature, if it is biotic components or abiotic components, too much of interference of human beings definitely depletes the biosphere. So you can see here, every organism, every ecosystem regulates and maintains itself and resists any kind of stress or disturbances up to a certain extent. Like we have immunity in our body, ecosystem has some resistance power. Slight disturbances, a little bit of cyclone, slight disturbances here and there, or a stress here and there, it can sustain or it can resist to certain extent. So such kind of system we call it as cybernetic system. We call it as cybernetic system, where ecosystem has its own resistance to little bit of disturbances, little bit of stress, it can resist and it can sustain. So that is the reason we call it as cybernetic system. So these are the regulatory functions. It maintains cycles properly, food production happens in the ecosystem, and you can see the regulatory functions here. So formation of soil, climate, temperature regulations, or we are talking about responsible stability of the ecosystem. All these are the regulatory functions of the ecosystem. Okay, so the next one, conclusions. Why you have to learn about this particular ecosystem? Because life interacts with its abiotic component also. So many a times students are just have in their minds only about the biotic components, but abiotic components also play an important role. That is the reason why we have to know about abiotic components and actual ecosystem. So here, understanding biogeochemical cycles is crucial. It's very important because we do not interfere with it. It goes on perfectly. Okay, next, understanding of the energy flow and the chemistry increases our understanding of organisms, their environment, and how environmental systems function. So understanding of all the cycles, or we are talking about regulatory functions, or we are talking about the energy flow or the chemistry which happens in the atmosphere, will definitely increase our insight towards nature. Thinking in terms of systems can teach us how to avoid disrupting Earth's processes and how to mitigate any disruptions we cause. So, in terms of systems, definitely thinking about all this. When we have an idea of the cycles or the energy cycles, or we are talking about atmospheric cycles, definitely we see that we don't interfere much with their cycle regulation and all. So, that is why definitely every citizen should know the biotic components as well as the abiotic components which are present in the atmosphere and which is maintaining the ecosystem. So it is a structural, functional unit of biosphere. So yes, that is why we are dependent on this ecosystem. So this is the conclusion. Yes, in today's session, you have learned about the ecosystem, definition of an ecosystem, types of ecosystem, classification of ecosystems, and structure and functions of ecosystems. Thank you for now. Let's meet for the next session.